25 years and 6 mainline games, the Persona series spans generations. And with the boom in popularity due to Persona 5, a hot topic in the community has been discussing the potential of remakes. It's gone so far that even Atlus has asked in their survey if people are interested in remakes of certain Persona titles. However, this is also a hot topic because it's discussion of which games should be remade. There's a high demand for Persona 3 to be remade, but on top of that, there is also demand for Persona 1 and 2. As a note, when I talk about 2, I am referring to both Innocent Sin and Eternal Punishment. With the recent rumor of a Persona 3 remake, people have been discussing whether Persona 3 deserves to have that remake or even needs it for that matter. And I think this is an interesting topic to discuss. After all, remakes are about modernizing gameplay and modernizing visuals. So wouldn't you say that Persona 1 and 2 deserve that first? Truth be told, I agree. I do think Persona 1 and the 2 Persona 2 games deserve to have remakes before 3. They're a lot older and they're a lot less accessible to most people, especially with Persona 3 Portable being ported to modern systems. That said, it's not so black and white. Of course, Atlus has been asking about a Persona 3 remake for a while, and although I haven't played P1 or P2, I'm sure the games do need a modern facelift as well as modern gameplay changes. That being said, I would like them to retain their original form, at least in most of its capacity, meaning you don't have to change those games to be like Personas 3 and 5. They should still be what they originally were as well. And I'm sure Atlus knows that. However, the thing about remaking games and making games in general is that you have to make sure that these games will sell. Unfortunately, as much as some of us do want a Persona 1 and 2 remake just so we can have the chance to play it for the first time, or whatever it may be, Persona 3 is a little bit more marketable currently. It follows the same formulas as 4 and 5, which makes it a little bit more interesting to the people who have already played the more recent Persona games. So unfortunately, Atlus is a business, so they can't just do whatever they want. With Persona 3, I think it does need a little bit of gameplay modernization. For some people, it may seem fine. They might even love it, and that's okay. Unfortunately, it has a lot to do with gameplay standard. That doesn't mean that your standards are wrong, or that they're too low, it just means they're different. Everyone has different standards for these kinds of things. People who play big AAA games will have a different standard from people who play indies, or from people who play older titles. Even further than that, where you start gaming in a series could affect how you feel about games overall. To use a JRPG related example, if your first Tales of game was Arise, then you may not like the more button mashy and unclear style of Berseria's combat. And if you go back even further, older Tales games might feel clunky to you. And a lot of you might be disagreeing with the thing that I just said, and that's exactly what I mean, is that our standards for gameplay are very different. Modernizing a game's gameplay would ultimately mean changing it to make it more accessible to new players. A remake should both satisfy old fans, but also bring in new ones. And it's hard to do that without some give and take. Persona 3 already has several mechanics that are a little bit gruesome to new players. You have to manage your time wisely. You're on a calendar-based system, so every action you take really does count. Compound that with extra mechanics like the tired mechanic or social link reversals, and it becomes a little bit more of a hassle. Perhaps my suggestion is to put those on a difficulty selection screen, so you can choose whether to have those options on or off. I don't know how simple that would be, or if that would be too difficult to do, or too bothersome to do, but it is the only idea I have right now if we are to retain those mechanics. If you don't know, there are two versions of Persona 3. Persona 3 FES, and Persona 3 Portable. Both of these have kind of different stories. FES contains an arc called The Answer, which is not included in Portable. Portable contains the story of the female protagonist, which is not included in FES. The problem is both of these storylines are somewhat canonical, with the female protagonist appearing in Persona Q2. The Answer is also referenced in Persona 4 Arena. So even with this port of Persona 3 Portable, the story is still kind of incomplete. A remake could help tie up all of that together, putting the female protagonist line as well as the answer into one game. Other than that, I'd say keep the story the same. Remaking a game does not really need to involve changing the story drastically. The main dungeon of Persona 3 is called Tartarus. It's not particularly flashy, it was a lot of floors of dungeon crawling, and I never really finished it. I didn't finish P3 at all, in fact, and I've always thought about how they would change it to modernize the game, but I'm really not too sure. If they can figure out how to modernize this dungeon a little bit better, to make it more interesting and more intriguing, then sure. If they can't, then it's okay to leave it roughly the same. It can be a little monotonous. After all, you are climbing a giant tower, and that could be monotonous in itself. I would love if they modernized it a bit, but I really have no clear ideas for this one. And to be clear, I don't think Persona 3 deserves a remake over the older games. I do think that Persona 1 and Persona 2 do deserve this remake a bit more. But to me personally, I feel like Persona 3 has aged enough where it could use the remake. There are a lot of things in this game that have aged considerably, and you may not find them bothersome, but some people do. And the main thing I want them to do is to tie all the stories in Persona 3 into one cohesive package. So hopefully if they remake the game, that is the thing that they try to do the most. And while Persona 4 does have some similar issues, it's much less needing of a remake. And even though I personally would love to see it happen, I hope it doesn't happen before Personas 1 and 2. I think the priority should be on older titles that are much less accessible. There's a lot of want from Atlus on the side of Persona, and I don't think it's unjustified to not desire remakes at all. You might just want new Persona games. But this kind of thing can be a little complex. After all, Persona has grown drastically in the past 5 years. Atlus is a name you now see flying pretty high on people's radars, and at the end of the day, businesses are businesses. You may wish for Persona 1 and 2 to get remade, and perhaps someday they will, but if they decide to go with Persona 3 first, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. After all, these remakes are probably more than ideas, with Atlus bombarding us with those questions on those surveys. But I want to know what you think. Do you think Atlus should be remaking Persona titles? Do you think Persona 3 should come before Persona 1 and 2? Would you buy any of these if they were remade? And what do you know about Persona 1 and 2? If you've played them before, you might have a better outlook than I do. And I would really appreciate if you shared that in the comments below. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, and thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel for more Atlus and Persona related content. I'm going to try to keep this ball rolling for hopefully the next 2 weeks. Until next time, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.